right, here we are. We're at lesson 4, and boy, let me tell you, this lesson gets into some pretty heavy lifting, but is really good. I honestly think that if you're following along and you've caught this video, it's worth going and downloading the whole course just to watch this video if you're thinking about creating a course. Because in this lesson, James talks about a huge mistake most make in that the lead magnet they create doesn't create demand for their eventual paid offer. And this may be one of the biggest aha moments in this entire course for me. The lead magnet should be great and stand on its own, but leave the customer wanting more, but more aptly to take the next step with me. This is like a warm and cozy feeling, unlike I just left somebody hanging. You know, it's like being at a concert that ended a great set, but you really want that encore. So like, while I may be building my list with my lead magnet, which seems like a win, it's not actually gonna deliver sales unless it's kind of like part of the process and leads to my paid offer, and like makes a ton of sense. And like, I really was focusing a lot on like building leads. So for me, I've decided that the paid offer that I'm going to offer is how to set up your professional video podcast in a weekend. So my lead magnet needs to be something that's great and could stand on its own, but is a building block to that paid offer. So if I go back to my list of potential topics I could teach from lesson 3, there are a few that won't work. Actually, everything but my first topic doesn't work. And that is, what is my video podcast equipment setup? So like, I could give everybody the list of everything that I've spent 2 years pulling together. And this is basically the first step in being able to set up a video podcast. But how to actually put it all together is what the course would be. So like, how does it work? How is it set up? Like, how does the software work? I'm giving you the list, but like, that's the first step. Now, as a reminder here, the rest of the ideas I came up in lesson 3. So like, number 2 is how to get podcast guests. Like, that's not going to help me because that's not leading somebody to say, okay, well, how do you set up your video podcast? How to source podcast start, same thing. Solo podcast formats, good to know. How to automate podcast guesting. How to manage podcast storage. Like, I think those are all great standalone topics and could possibly be bonus topics I can include in my paid offer, but they would just be goodwill at best. Meaning that if someone requested one of these, I'd simply be hoping that they, 1, were interested in setting up a video podcast, and 2, liked my content so much that they came back to find me and bought the actual course. So the exercise in this video is to go through and list out the external outcomes the paid offer will provide, which is something that can be clearly identified and tangible for me. So the external outcome is having the right tools and equipment and software set up to execute a video podcast in less than a weekend. So with under a weekend, like, you could be up and running with all the tools and the software and everything set up and ready to go. That is something that can be clearly measured. Next, the question is, what does that give them and what's the internal benefit? So internally, my customers would be able to confidently push the record button so that they can focus on creating the best show and content rather than worrying about how it looks or making mistakes, which would then allow them to have more exposure on YouTube, as well as content that can be repurposed to all of the other social media platforms. Thus, like, even more exposure. So with better content and exponentially more exposure, they will see faster audience growth and the ability to monetize their effort and attract better guests, better sponsors, and then affiliate relationships. So next, he talks about diving into clearly defining the external and internal benefits for the lead magnet. So like, we just talked about the paid offer there. So notice here, it's in reverse stacking. I've identified what my audience ultimately wants, and I should be using that in the lead magnet itself. If you recall, the lead magnet will be the equipment, tools, and software needed to run a professional looking video podcast. The external outcome is that when you opt in, you will know exactly what software and equipment you are needed to run a very successful video podcast without having to piece it all together through trial and error, which is what I did. Now, for the internal aspects, that will give them so much time back not to have to hunt stuff down, save a ton of money to not try things in hopes that it'll work, and the peace of mind that this is exactly the tools that I use and the results are already verifiable. Okay, Now I feel like I have my arms around my paid offer and the lead magnet. And if you found this video and you aren't following along, I really strongly recommend you grab the free course yourself. I've got the link in the description below. That'll help tremendously to see exactly what he's talking about as I kind of explain what I'm coming up with for my products.